Welcome to the Holistic Pathway podcast, unscripted conversations of mind, body, spirit, and entrepreneurship. A new video series podcast where we dive deep into the holistic integration of life and business. I am Tammy Coyne, your holistic alchemist, helping you change pain into possibilities and possibilities into purpose. Today's chat is with Ellen Newhouse. And for the past 34 years, Ellen has been empowering women and men to heal their emotional, physical, and spiritual bodies with a healthy dose of woo and a whole lot of wisdom. Ellen integrates acupuncture with transformational coaching and sound healing. As best-selling author of memoir Nothing Ever Goes On, Ellen inspires people to know that no matter what has happened in their lives, they too can heal, learn to forgive, and learn to love themselves. I'm very excited about my chat with Ellen today. I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned, and we'll see you shortly. Well, hello, Ellen. It is so good to see you. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
I am so excited, especially because I've seen so many changes in you over this last year. I have been so curious. I know there's so much, but I'm so curious about what was the major shift in doing this yoga and entrainment and training?
Well, so in 2016, I had finished a healing arts education, became a mind body wellness practitioner. Around that same time, my husband left, my life started falling apart. I was gifted a scholarship to yoga teacher training, and I thought, okay. And I went and was only able to go like the first module and then had to sell everything and move back to Oklahoma.
Oh,
All that to say, I had been going to class, 3 hours a day, 4 days a week for that whole module, and then went back to Oklahoma and then just nothing. And then things were crazy. Okay, fast forward, probably around 2023 at some period early in the year, I started feeling this sort of pull back to yoga, pull back to my class, which was in Arizona. But I'm like, I don't know. And then the next thing I know, my son and I are en route and moving to Arizona. I was planning to go to California, reroute it here. It was a whole thing. It's a spirit thing. I've been a spiritual ping pong ball for 10 years. So, around right after we got here in May, I started feeling the urge to like take a yoga class. And I took a couple of classes and I'm like, it's not quite what I'm after. And I ended up going back to the school. And of course, my scholarship was long gone. And I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And yeah, so I ended up getting into the 1,000-hour yoga therapy program. And the first 200 hours was yoga teacher training, which I finished in January is when I finished my practicums. So long story, but that's kind of how that all went. And then now I'm not practicing, I'm not doing anything right now. So I don't know. Spirit pushes me, and then I don't know what's
Well,
happening.
it's interesting though, because I saw physically a huge shift in you. I mean, you literally look like 10 years younger or more. No, I'm serious. It's like
Thank you.
something let go during that time. Because I was trying to think about where we connected. I think we connected in Gina Gabellini's course,
I
right?
think we did. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And that was maybe 2020, maybe
Something,
2019, somewhere in there.
something in there. Yeah. But you look so much younger than you did when we took that course together.
Thank you. Well, I just turned 59 in January, and I would say during that period of time, there were several things. One, I really needed to leave Oklahoma. That's the scene of a whole lot of trauma for me, even though my family is there, even though I love my family and I have some positive things there too. It's emotionally and physically better for me not to live there.
Very clearly.
Yeah. And when
Because
we
you
got
see,
here, I could barely get up the stairs here. We live on the second floor and I could barely get up the stairs. I was so incredibly sick. And I was doing some really strong self-care stuff during that period. I started school. While I was in school, I was doing some intermittent fasting.
Mm.
And I started wearing a little makeup every now and
Ah,
then. So I think it's a combination of all of those things.
but it really looked like something about the yoga allowed a heavy, it looks like a heavy weight got lifted. It's the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing, right, with this holistic journey is that my work is all about the root emotions. And so I heal and go layers and layers and layers to get to, and I listen to the body as being a compass to
Yes.
say, oh, okay. Like the other day, I noticed this finger is hurting, and I'm like, what are you trying to tell me? What's your message for me? And
Right.
so that's how I navigate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, navigate everything. So, and you always look like $1 million. So, I mean, you've got that going on. I mean, and this is one thing that I want to share with people because I think we've established that you're older than I am and you look amazing. And I think there's not like a magic solution other than holistically healing.
Yeah. And I mean, as you know, what got me into my whole healing journey was when I woke up at 26 and couldn't breathe. And the whole life that I'd been living up until that point completely disintegrated. And I was living a big life. I had just won the best, well, one, I don't know if that's the right word, but um, I had one, I guess it's the only word I can think of. The biggest job of my life at 25 and was working at Vanity Fair magazine in the sales department. And it was huge. It was massive. And then to wake up a year and a half later and I can't breathe, I was like, okay. And I spent 2 years in Western medicine and they had no solution for me. I mean,
Mhm.
in the end, the doctor, this huge specialist said, well, we all agree that you're not getting enough oxygen and we've come up with a solution. And I leaned forward. I was so excited. I was like, great, because nothing was working. We're going to give you an oxygen tank. I was like, no, that is not a solution. And it was frightening because in those years, there was no alternative medicine. And
Mhm.
so I felt completely left to myself, like completely like, okay, now what happens? You
Yeah.
know, and so I think if people find themselves in those circumstances, like now today, we have so many alternative practitioners, but sometimes we still find ourselves in those positions of like, nobody can figure out what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And that's when I went to God because I figured he was the only one that was going to help me through this whole journey because nobody seemed to know.
Yeah.
And sometimes when we're left in that place where nobody seems to know, I think it's a sure sign that we're on the road to some amazing opening to mystery, opening to spirit. Perhaps it's set up that way on purpose, so that we literally open ourselves.
Ellen, I love that so much because, yeah, I was thinking when I was a child, the only sort of alternative medicine I ever heard about was chiropractic. And and people thought they were quacks. And then you might, oh, and if there was a DO, a
Oh,
doctor of osteopathy, it was like, those were like edgy, those
right.
were the edgy things that I remember being a child, and it's so interesting because I also had an oxygen tank.
Mm.
I sure did. Now, when you think about that, oxygen, what is that? That's like our life force. That's our prana, right? And when we are giving it out to so many places and there's nothing coming back. So at 38, I was diagnosed with emphysema and told I would not make it to 50.
Oh my. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I had a spreadsheet of diagnoses, and the oxygen tank didn't come until, when did they put me on that? Gosh, when was that? There were so many different health crises that happened. I may have even been on one 2 different times.
Hmm.
Maybe one in 2010-ish, because I nearly died that year. I had gangrene in my intestines, and that was that year. And so I feel like, because I had been diagnosed with sleep apnea, so I was on a CPAP for 12 years. Yeah,
Whoa.
so there was a lot of stuff, and I had a full team of doctors. And I remember I used to say, I really just cannot take one more ologist. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I can't. And while they did help me and they did save my life, it felt like my life was a series of trips to doctors, hospitals, pharmacies. And I was just like, you know what? I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm over this.
Yes. Tammy, can we pause this for a moment? I need to reboot.
All right, tech issues and all, we are live and going on. Okay, so yeah, so that's the thing, with all the health issues, and that's part of why when I've worked with people individually, the very first thing I want to look at is the mind-body connection. Like, what is your body telling us? And is your body giving us clues? So I want them to think about head to toe. I want them to think about anything they've ever had a surgery for, a diagnosis for, a prescription for, or a broken bone, or an addiction. Like, what's your body telling us, and that gives us a compass for what you're holding from an emotional childhood that may be keeping you from moving forward. And so I love to look at that as a starting place. So tell me now, so you decided no on the oxygen tank, and then what happened after that?
So the very first thing that happened was I got home and I was like, that's it. I am going to sit down and have a chat with God. And I remember thinking about all my little Christian friends and how they would pray on their hands and knees. So that's what I did. And God did not come down in that very moment. But what did happen in that moment was that I committed to a prayer practice like none other. I was so committed and serious about it. And I think it was not only a commitment to prayer, but a commitment to wellness, a commitment to living, no
Mm-hmm.
matter what.
Yep.
And within 1 month, Tammy, it was so scary. I was completely changed. I mean, I had guides talking to me, I had angels speaking to me. And I think it all could have been very exciting had I not been born to a woman who's had severe mental illness. And so I was like, oh God, this is it. I'm going down. I couldn't see the positive of, oh, I now have guides that are wanting to guide me.
Yeah.
So I had to work through the fear of, oh my God, am I going to become her?
Yeah.
Because, that was my greatest fear at the time. And very slowly, they worked with me. They spoke to me. They gave me ideas of things to do. They would tell me where to go. And I was so scared. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. But since nobody else could help me, I was like, all right, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try this. And unbelievably, every time I listened and took action on whatever the angels and guides were telling me, they brought me to healers. Now, in that era, there were no healers to be found. So I was like, how did they know that that person would be there to help me? And they showed me again and again how to trust them.
Hmm.
So that was the first thing, was to listening to the voices and the angels and guides that were guiding me, even though I was scared to death.
I love that so much. And that's, again, I think that's why Spirit directed me again, guided me to do this podcast, because it literally, the ideas came when I was out having lunch with a friend that we thought our conversation was awesome and other people could benefit, and we would just record it and put it up. And I threw this Facebook post out just sort of willy-nilly. And the next thing I know, I had all these people, and I was like, okay, so this feels like I'm on the right track, because with my awakening, I had been given a very specific uh, mission. And for 10 years, I've been attempting to do all of that. And then a year later, the message I got was that I was here to be a lighthouse for the lighthouses. And I was like, okay, I kind of get that, but I don't really know what that looks like. And I think we're entering that phase now. And, when you talk about that, because one of the reasons, I got off track a little bit, is that I feel strongly that pulling people together, what I call the lighthouses from all over the world,
Mm.
gives us an opportunity for our lights to come together and shine a brighter light in the world. Is one thing. The other thing is that I believe that we all dip into our human experience sometimes and forget again that we're here to be a lighthouse.
Mhm.
And so if we're surrounded by these others, I think that helps us also. And also then for the viewers to recognize, if they are going through some of the things that we've gone through before, that they're not crazy, they're not losing their mind, and there are people that they can actually talk to about that. I know I have had clients come to me that have no idea how they found me. No idea. We it by most people's definition would say random or coincidence, which we know is just not even true. And oftentimes they will sit and not even really know what to say to me. And so I have to just keep talking, and then they'll go, wait, let's talk more about that. And I say, okay, it's like all of a sudden they knew that I was a person that they could share what they had been challenged with, struggling with, whatever on the inside, and couldn't tell anyone else.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, this whole journey is amazing.
Mhm.
It is not a journey I would have, my personality would have chosen. Uh,
No.
I would have stayed in the corporate world very happily. And today, what I find amazing is that people don't have to be alone on their journeys. Like the one companion that I have, because I couldn't talk to anybody. I mean, we're talking, this was like 1980, by the time the time that we're talking 1987, 1988. I mean, if
Mhm.
you spoke about this, people would think you were crazy.
Yeah.
One companion that I did have that I loved, and I want to mention it because I think it's such a great resource for people who are wondering, what is wrong with me? Am I crazy? What is going on? is a book called Spiritual Emergency. And it really allowed me to delineate, am I crazy like my mom? Am I suffering from mental illness? Or am I going through something else? And it really very carefully and clearly shows you, where you are on the journey. And if what your personal transformation is just giving you symptoms that could appear as mental illness, but is not. So
Mhm.
it was so helpful for me.
I love that so much because I think, and I've talked before about the very distinct difference between depression versus dark night of the soul. I've been through both. I've been through both multiple times. And to know it is, again, yes, the journey I've been through, both through my human experience and my spiritual experience, I would not wish on anyone. It has not been unicorns, roses, and sunshine. And yet, I also know that what I've been called to do, all of it was necessary to give me what I needed to be there. And, in thinking about your time at Vanity Fair, what's so interesting, I in high school was in fashion merchandising and then became pregnant, became a mom at 17 and went to work for the Internal Revenue Service. So a big job, right? And for 10 years, I would cry on the weekends and I would throw up before I went to work. But this was, and I loved those people. They were so good to me, but it was so out of alignment with me. And I had no idea what alignment necessarily meant. I had had all kinds of gifts, abilities for a long time, but I didn't really think much about it, and I talked to people in my family about it or whatever, but then when you get into the practicality things, well, you just need to go to work. You just need to get a job. Doesn't matter if it makes you sick or not. You just need to get there,
Yeah.
you know?
Up until now, and perhaps a little bit still now, the metrics of success were power and money, not the ability to see, not how much empathy you have, not
Yeah.
how much compassion you have. Now, I do think, despite what's going on politically, I do think we are moving in a direction where the metrics for success will shift, will be about, are you listening to your higher self? Are you listening to your inner voices? Do you have compassion for yourself? Do you have empathy for others? I see this shifting dramatically, especially in the young men I work with. They are so much more empathetic, so much um, bigger hearted than the men of other generations. I mean, now they have their challenges, but I really see a very big shift happening, and it's exciting. It's exciting to say, oh, down the road, the metrics for success will be different.
Well, two things about that. First, I love men. I often say that. I love and adore them. And what I have found is their hearts, I have a son, I have a grandson, so I know them even different. And I've spent my life around veterans and different things. And what I know is they have these, no matter what shows up on the outside, they have these amazing hearts, and deep emotions that sometimes people don't see, and they're covered up with these other things. And I love that they are now, many are beginning to feel safe enough to share that part of themselves. That was one part that I really loved. And you mentioned success, and I shared this with someone the other day. I don't know if it was on one of these chats or not, but for the longest time, there was a Booker T. Washington quote that was my sort of a battle cry, right? It was, I had it posted at my desk, and it's words to live by, and still a great quote. And the idea was, success is not measured by the status you've reached, but by the obstacles you've overcome. Now, that's generally the idea of it. And that was like, oh yeah, I've overcome so many obstacles. That's my definition of success right there. And then after years, I was like, oh my God, I am so tired of overcoming obstacles. I think I'm going to redefine success for myself. And I think that's something that we all can do. We can all redefine success. We can redefine whatever it is in your life that isn't working. I can call taking out the trash adventure. Like I can, because it's a shift in my head, of what that means to me. And I just love the idea that maybe there's a space now for people to start to redefine things for themselves, start to lead from their heart, start to listen to spiritual guidance and things like that, and maybe do things in their life that they actually love to do. How different would life be if everyone wasn't living under the should?
Absolutely. But I think one of the challenges of living, doing what you love is that I think in the past we've sold people down this road of, oh, it's going to be so easy. Just do what you love and it all will fall into place. And
Yeah.
that's not exactly the truth. And,
No.
I think we have to be a little bit clear about what are we setting people up for? Because if people think just by merely doing what you love, it all is going to be easy, that doesn't make sense to me either. It's like we came here on purpose to learn, and the only way that I see that we truly learn is when we stretch beyond what we know. And that's not easy. So because sometimes I get concerned that people start down a path of doing what they love, and then it's hard. And then they go, oh, well, then I'm not supposed to be doing this because it's hard. People, life is hard at
Mhm.
times. And we learn by stretching beyond what we know. And part of growing in the earth plane is by going through those hard things.
100%. And I've talked about this in different ways before. In fact, I even said to somebody just a couple of days ago, the vision I had when I was talking to her was literally that flower trying to grow up through concrete, because, and, there's something that goes around that's really good. I've seen called choose your hard. It's like, the thing about it is it would be so much easier for me to go get a regular job
Yes.
in theory, in
Yes.
theory.
Yeah.
And yet I could also be dying inside, but it would make a lot of other things very much easier. And this is what I've told some people who have gone through newly awakening, and to share with them, if you thought this was going to be easier than that, oh no, all of that was preparing you for how hard this is actually going to be. And that's what I think is important for people to know, is that storms do not stop coming. In fact, the storms are, yeah, worse. And, coming from a life of severe trauma, abuse, and loss, I didn't think storms could get worse. Oh, they're worse. And I'm also different in how I navigate them. I also know how to navigate them. My tools are better. My resilience is different. The way that I show up is different. And I now know and fully believe that the purpose is strengthening me for the next thing that's coming, and I think that's so important for people to get. It's kind of like the positive thinking. Do I believe in positive thinking? Yes, I do. but not, please don't take that face value and think if you're having a shit day or you're depressed, that somehow you're doing it wrong, because you need to feel those emotions, you know?
Right. And I'm so glad you said that, because I think sometimes there's a lot of confusion about, well, if I were doing it right, I would feel better. I would feel great all the time. I mean, my husband and I just had this conversation over the weekend, and he said, I want to be happy every single day. And I said, well, I don't think that that is possible. And he's like, no, it's possible. That's what I want. And I said, okay, you can strive towards that. But the human condition is that we're going to feel angry. We're going to feel sad. We're going to grieve. We're going to feel loss. We're going to feel frustrated. We're going to feel excited, and we're going to feel joy, and we're going to feel, it's like all the feelings. You don't just get to have one, you know?
No, and oftentimes they're happening simultaneously, like those times where maybe someone has a birth of a child happening the same time as is they're losing a family member or something like that, or a loss of a job or whatever. There's like all these simultaneous things going on. And it's so important, I think, for people to get that, to understand that, and yeah, and you can choose happy, awesome, and also not bypass what you may actually be feeling.
Exactly. And so I call that a spiritual bypass, when we just want to feel one thing. And
Yeah.
I had a great teacher early on who said something to me as I was suffering deeply, as I was healing from a childhood of a lot of trauma. And he said, Ellen, in an open belly, there's room for it all the love, all the hatred, all the joy, all the sadness, all the happiness, all the love, and he kept going on and on like this. And at the time, I just was shaking my head no, because I didn't want to feel all the feelings, all the very hard, dark, deep um, sadness that I had been shoving down for years.
Yeah.
And when it came up in a great force. But I have learned over the years how right he was, is that when we can practice staying open to all of the emotions and not just some of them, it's A, it's possible, and B, it makes all of the emotions much easier to feel.
So true. And, like three things came to mind when you were sharing that. Whether I remember them all or not is another story. But one of the things that came to me was that there were times on my healing journey that I feared if I opened that Pandora's box that I literally might die. That
Yes.
it may be the end of me because it was just too much and it would never stop. That was one feeling. And then it became very clear to me that I only lived in those feelings, almost like I had become, and I still have to really watch that. It's like I spent so many years dysregulated, as a new word. I didn't even know that word until recently, dysregulated, or whether it was dissociated or depressed or whatever I was feeling, that became my norm. And so to feel anything else felt weird.
Yeah.
So that was two things. The other thing is, one of the things on my healing journey, the more I've healed, and you learn about this quite a bit in yoga also, and it was something I already had a knowing about, is the more healing you do, the extremes of the emotions really stop. And you have these fluctuations that are a little bit more like this, and that can be a little challenging to get used to too, when you've been someone who rode the roller coaster of emotions, because nobody wants to be way down here, but everybody wants to be way up here, and when you realize that those flux, the more you heal, they come closer to midline, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, in the beginning, I think that feels dysregulated, if you will. I mean, it feels like, wait, what happened to all my joy, my excitement, all of the highs? But the learning that down here, those highs and excitement can feel as wonderful here, in that you don't have to be up so high to feel that. Because like you, I had so much work to do that I think a lot of times I associated the high highs with feeling anything. Does
Yeah.
that make sense? Like I couldn't feel unless it was that high, but
Yeah.
then there I had to come down that low. And um and one of the things a therapist that I was working with at that same time said to me, and she said, Ellen, I want you to see how much happiness you can hold and for how long. And in the beginning, I was like, oh, I can hold happiness for, I love joy. I love happiness. Do that for all day long, every day. And as I played with it, I started to see what would disrupt that emotion and what took me away and how uncomfortable I actually was with happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
oh wait, that does not feel safe.
Well, exactly. And that's what I was talking about. When you're so used to living in fight or flight or freeze, or when your whole life is that, it's ready to go, and we've often called things by a name that wasn't really. Like for me, probably joy usually came out of being dissociated, you know, and it's so interesting because the I think about, if you are feeling a certain way a predominant amount of the time, let's say it's joy. Um, and this is maybe a weird take on it, I don't know, but people can become complacent with things. And I feel like the human experience gives us sometimes these really painful things so we can experience that joy when things are amazing or when we receive something. It's like I've said before, I don't wish what I've been through on on any human ever. And yet I also know that because of all of those things, I care at a level I don't know that I would have ever cared had I not gone to that depth of despair.
Absolutely. I agree. 100%. I mean, I often say if I grew up in the neighborhood that I grew up in, which was fairly wealthy, and lived a normal life, I never would have become me, ever. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have opened my heart. I wouldn't have gained the compassion that I have or the knowledge. I mean, there's a lot that I learned by going through all of that. So I'm thinking as I listen to your story and my story of like, if we were at the beginning of our journeys and there was nobody that you felt safe to talk to, but you felt this, like, I'm wondering what I would give myself in that time, something that would help me.
Yeah.
And so what I want to give people who might be listening to this, who might be at the very beginning of their journey, very confused, not understanding, I want to give them a journal to write in all everything that they're feeling, everything that they're afraid to feel, everything that they're afraid that they might be, as a way to start a conversation between themselves and themselves,
Mhm.
because I think in the big cities where I live, I don't know where you're living right now. It's a big city, but in the bigger cities, there are plenty of people like us to talk to.
Yeah.
But Places like Oklahoma, I don't imagine that there's a lot of people that they could talk to. Do you think?
Well, it's coming about. Like I'm back in Phoenix area now, but it's definitely coming about. In fact, I've got two holistic healer types on here from Oklahoma. So yeah, so that's great. And I'm looking to have someone from every state and also as many countries as possible. So right now we've got I've done Australia, Canada, South Africa, Vietnam. I've got Scotland coming up. So yeah, and part of the reason is if someone is somewhere, wherever they are, that they can hear the voices of people, maybe in their wherever they live. Maybe it's someone online they can connect to, because yeah, sometimes people are just sitting there not knowing, like this is their four walls, that's all they know. How would they know there's anything different?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So what would you give to somebody who is feeling confused or super depressed and they don't really understand what's going on? They may not know that they're being called to, opening to spirit, or they may not be knowing that this condition that they're living with isn't all that they may think it is. What would you give them as a resource?
Well, this podcast is one of the things I'm attempting to give them as a resource. And I give a consultation, someplace they can call that's free, someplace they can call it's free that we can talk about it. And part of the reason why that is, I think a journal is an amazing idea if they are someone like I was. I would not journal. I would not journal. I did not feel safe to journal. I had a diary at one point that the lock was broken on, and I would, if I ever wrote in it, I would tear the pages out. Like it felt unsafe for me. So it took me years to be able to write my feelings down, and so I sometimes if it's something they can do on their own, uh I would even say sit in a field and talk to God. I used to do that a lot as a child, or spirit, whatever feels comforting to you. I would go in a field all by myself and just sit and listen for guidance or talk or whatever I needed to do, just so I could feel safe. Because sometimes being alone was the only time I felt safe.
I agree with that. I felt far safer in nature than I
Hmm.
human beings.
Yeah.
Very long time. I mean, it took me a long time before I even recognized that. I didn't understand why I always wanted to be outside rather
Yeah.
than inside. Well,
You know, something else that came to mind that I used to do as a child is I did have a big heart for people, and oftentimes if I saw someone who seemed like they looked how I felt on the inside, I would talk with them. I remember I had a hearing impaired girl that lived next door to me. I was kindergarten and she was older than me, and she always just sat out there by herself by the fence, because this would have been like early 70s. And so she I don't think people knew how to, well, they didn't know how to talk to her because she couldn't hear them, and so we would sit out there and talk by the fence. And I think that was really just really helpful for both of us, and even if we had a not the norm style of communication, because I didn't know sign language. I'm not even sure I knew what that was at that time. But we worked it out.
oh, it's such a sweet story.
Yeah. I always think of her.
Oh, I'm sure it helped a lot because in that time people were ignored.
Well, and later I ended up working with a hearing impaired woman at IRS actually, and we became friends. And then after I became a coach, I was working online and I had a hearing impaired woman come to me, and we had a like a digital type translator that worked between us, and I coached her that way. So.
So it was like a reader board?
No, it was, well, it may have been on her side, but we had a third party with us, and they would give her what she needed and then give me what I needed. So yeah, it was a challenge, but I thought, well, shoot, she's got this challenge every day of her life. Surely I can, handle the challenge for an hour or however long we're together. So yeah, and we made it work.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah.
So
So
good.
I don't know. Sometimes I just think about people, and also to know that there's not just one way of doing things. So many people like say, "Oh, I can't meditate." Well, let's think about who you are, and let's see if we can come up with ways that you can come up with ways that make sense for you. For me, started out sometimes was just putting my hands on the steering wheel and feeling the steering wheel. That can be a meditation because it grounds you into mindfulness.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people I know, for me, it was meditation was a huge issue because I didn't feel safe to close my eyes. And
Exactly.
in the era that I grew up, in meditation only meant one thing: cross your legs, put your hands down, and close your eyes. And I was just like, I would close my eyes, and oh my God, my nervous system went haywire because I just kept imagining being hit. And so that did not work.
A
So
100%. And I've said this to people too, and I've taught meditation, and sometimes it's people cannot sit still. I'd rock and I'd do these different things. And for a long time, I told people that, I really, and I had an amazing meditation teacher. What I said is, I really learned meditation 1 minute at a time in the bathroom stall at work, and share how I turned that into ultimately becoming a teacher, because it takes you, if someone expresses that they're having trouble or they don't express it, but you as a teacher can recognize that maybe they don't feel comfortable or whatever, what can you do to help them find something instead of trying to force them in somebody else's box? How do you bring something to them and let them grow with that?
absolutely, because I mean, this idea that healing only happens in certain ways is so it's such an ill-conceived notion because we're all so unique, and what may heal you may elicit great fear in me and vice versa. So we really have to know what what will work for my spirit, for my constitution, for your spirit, for your constitution. So I love that because I remember in the beginning I went to certain therapists who had certain notions and none of it worked for me.
Yeah. Well, for real. And that's the other thing is I think it's so important for people to first understand that they have permission to go, this doesn't work for me, or this is not the right person for me, or maybe it was the right person for me, but it's no longer the right person for me now. And also, I've done some solo videos on fear and understanding different types of fear. And one I say is the fear that they use as an acronym, that's false evidence appearing real. Okay, so that's you're stepping out of your comfort zone. Ooh, it's uncomfortable. I'm scared. Okay, it's one type of fear. Or maybe it's a fear someone has a weapon to your head. Okay, that's a very different type of fear. Or maybe you walk in somewhere and you're like, hmm, I don't know why, but I don't feel this. Okay, so it's important that you learn to discern what those feelings are for you so that you can make a choice of, is this a time where I need to go the other way? Is this a time I need to pause? Or is this a time where I need to go, okay, you're okay. Just keep moving forward. Like where are you on that? I think that's hugely important for people to have that permission for themselves and also that boundary for themselves that says, I know me enough to choose. Because for years I had a broken radar. So I felt like I had to look to everyone else to give me answers because I didn't trust myself to have those answers.
Wow. Yeah. And to work with somebody who can encourage you to trust you.
Uh-huh.
Because I think there's a lot that goes on with I am the knower and you're, for years I did not like the word healer and I couldn't figure it out, didn't know what to call myself because I really didn't like the word healer. And eventually I figured it out is because the word healer has the notion that I heal you when I didn't feel that way. I felt that I create a condition, create an environment in which you heal yourself,
Yes.
you know. And so I think sometimes the notions that we've created about healing um, can in fact stifle the healing, if you put the power in somebody else's hands rather than saying, let's work together so that you can learn your voice. You can learn how to trust what's coming up for you. You can see the power that you have.
100%. Yes, I've had these conversations with clients before, and one, first to give them a safe space enough where they start to feel like they can share what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And I remember I had a client who back on the meditation thing, she's like, that just doesn't work for me. And I said, okay, what kinds of things do you enjoy? What kinds of things do you feel like you could do on a regular basis? And then gave her some ideas to incorporate some mindfulness techniques into that she could then grow with instead of feeling like she was failing, because she wasn't doing it right.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating because other people are there as guides for us and helpers for us, and to really create, like you said, create that space, create that condition or that container so that we can start to, I call it unboxing your authentic self, what we can unfold, we can open up, to things we didn't even realize that we had or we had forgotten.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a beautiful journey. So even though it has its challenges, I wouldn't miss out the world of me. It's been such a beautiful challenge, and such a beautiful journey.
I do. It is. To me, one of the greatest gifts is sitting with someone and watching their eyes light up when they get it, or when something opens up for them. Or to me, um, gosh, other than maybe witnessing a birth, um, and baby's feet. Let me just say,
Oh,
little baby feet. But beyond that, it's just miraculous. It's
it
just
is
miraculous.
because we are witnessing birth again and again and again and again. I love that notion because I've professionally attended 5 births, and each and every single one of them was miraculous. I mean, I was always the one that was sobbing. I was like, oh, I mean, just to observe and to participate. But on a smaller scale, we're witnessing births as people awaken to themselves, not just to the voice that says, I'll never be able to, I can't, but to the voice it's like, oh, that's me. I can do this. I can heal. Oh, I love it so much.
I love it too. Really helping people to open up to the to the divine being that they are. And that is one of the things that's so important to me when I work with clients, is to help them understand that they are a divine being, and to be able to recognize their own divinity within that is everything to me.
Oh, so beautiful.
Well, I cannot believe we are coming up on the end of our conversation. These go so fast. I love them so much. Is there anything that you have that you like comes to mind, like final thoughts or things, something like that?
Final thought is, no matter where you're sitting, no matter what's gone on in your life, no matter how hard it may look at the moment, I want you to know you can absolutely heal and create a life that you absolutely love, that's so suiting for you.
I love it. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank
So for those watching, thank you so much for another amazing episode of the Holistic Pathway podcast, where we talk mind, body, spirit, and entrepreneurship. A new episode, wow, today is uploaded every Saturday. Thank you so much for being here with us, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.